got funded the way that it needs to do, or to be. So when we're talking about a divide, they have been really successful in pitting urban and rural against each other. There is no need to be. We know when you're looking across the state that none of our children, none of the students in this state in public education, especially over the last 16 years when funding hasn't even kept up with inflation, are receiving the resources that they need to be successful. So when we talk about using this as a strategy, it's been great having WP and show up, develop, grow, and connect people from across the state, because there's a recognition of that. There's a recognition that we have to do this together. We have to be a single voice demanding what students need. And I've seen it over the years at multiple budget cycles. Heather would have a better count, but I think at least 3, where, and the Review Commission, where people from around the state continue to say the same thing over and over. Fund the programs our students need. Make sure that they get everything that they need possible so that we actually have productive citizens of Wisconsin. We have a place where people want to grow up, live, work, etc.
Well, that's great. We'll come back. We'll build on that. I think listening to both of you, another divide that I really feel is the one between Wisconsin's sort of storied, progressive past and the future that until recently you seem to be barreling towards. As a legislator and also somebody who has actually had the nerve to attend meetings of the American Legislative Exchange Commission, which is the sort of conservative, I'll let you describe it, but I'm curious if you have any sense of what is the vision that the right has in mind for a state like Wisconsin?
So we do have a long progressive history here in Wisconsin, and we also have a history of sending legislative Democrats to the American Legislative Exchange Council Conference every year, which is a uber conservative right-wing organization that sets a national and state agenda around very conservative far right-wing policies, especially at the state level. And Representative Francesca Hong and I have been members, so it's a nonprofit, so anybody can join. And if you join, you are a member and you can go to their conference. Last summer I was there and Ron DeSantis was the speaker. It was delightful. I live tweeted from it. I was, like up close and personal. And it's my favorite conference because when you're there, the assumption is you're a right-wing conservative, so they tell you all sorts of things. And you're like, oh, let me jot these ideas down. But we go so that we know right from the organization what we should be expecting, and then we come back, and they know we're there, and they know we're Democrats, and we come back and we inform our colleagues. And it was really interesting to hear what they were talking about in terms of public education, because as you know, and many of us know, right, this tsunami has just been growing and growing and growing. And if you've been watching national trends, this has been happening around the country, and they are positioning Wisconsin well for us, right, within Milwaukee, and then through these vouchers, even voucher growing, to move towards full privatization. And one of the things that I'm just going to say this that I thought was really interesting was we have been using the messaging to push back on vouchers that public money for public schools with public oversight, right? If it's public, we have it. They're our public schools. It's our money. It's our community. We make shared decisions. And up close and personal, they were really grappling with that message. In fact, there was a gentleman that stood up in a session and he said, I'm hearing this message about public money, public schools, public oversight, and I don't know what to say back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's winning, right? We're doing it. And so I think to your point about this progressive history is we've sort of been gaslit over the last 10 to 12 years by these terribly gerrymandered maps and to think that we're something that we're not. Because we've been looking at the legislator and looking at the numbers and saying, why are we seeing these insane policies being shoved down our throats that don't reflect what we want? And so I think it's created this sense of hopelessness and helplessness, right? That nothing can change, how do we get out of this? And that to me is the most dangerous place we can be, not only for our public schools, but for democracy and the functioning of our state. So again, because of these new maps, we're so uniquely positioned to not just restore ourselves back to our progressive history, but quite frankly, just to reflect the values of the state fully. And the state is a purple state. And as you all were talking about earlier in terms of public schools, they belong to everyone. Conservative, left, right, up, down, any religion, right? And it is the place where we have to come together and truly work out our differences, just like we do in state government. And I'm hopeful, again, that when we can see hopefully good results in November, that we really will be able to put forward good policy that isn't left or right, but just what's needed.
Thank you for that. That was amazing. Ingrid, another part of the story is obviously what's happened to unions in Wisconsin. And I think that there are a lot of people around the country, they remember those scenes of the big crowds rallying outside the State House a number of years ago as Act 10 was coming down. And perhaps they even ordered a pizza and had it sent to you. And then after that, they sort of tuned out. And so I want you to fill us in as a union activist on what, are unions part of this kind of resurgence of organizing in Wisconsin? Do you feel hopeful about that part of the story?
Definitely speaking on behalf of Milwaukee, unions have to be a part of that type of organizing. And just as part of being a larger union of WEAC, which is the state level union, also have to be a part of organizing. Without it, we're lost. So things, especially in education, I can speak to that, right? That's where my home has been all this time. When we talk about a worker's workplace, their environment, and work issues, and we know that that's part of what a union does, but it's so important to us because that workplace, those work issues, they impact students. And so the things that our members, just even on a local level, fight for are the fact that, I'll go with one that we've done recently, our art and music teachers recognize that there was a lack of equity in how art and music was accessed among students in the district. All these programs happen on one side of town, or et cetera. And those members got together with each other, they got together with community members, they got together with families, and they pushed on the board to create an art and music policy that focused on equity to ensure that the first students being served were the students who have been neglected the longest. That is the type of things that we know we can do when we come together, and especially like as education workers, we know what's best. We know what students need. We know they need smaller class sizes. We know they need art, music, fire, library, keep going. So in order to shine that light, it does take workers getting together and making that happen.
You mentioned that you're really hopeful about the next election cycle. Can you sort of sketch out for us what you're hopeful about and how you see support for public education playing into that?
That's a great question. Ingrid, I just wanted to say, I love what you were talking about there. When I was on the school board, I will always say the working environment is the learning environment. So if the workers and the educators in the classroom aren't supported, the students aren't. And so thank you for fighting for that. Am I hopeful? I am. You have to be hopeful, right? If we don't have hope, what are we doing? Number one, I want school meals for all. I got my shirt on today. I will fight for this until I'm done. You will be so sick of hearing me talk about this. I can go on and on. Allison is in the back. She's running this coalition. It's such a beautiful, I could get like teary. I love it. I wrote this bill. It's just the best. It's like, who doesn't want to feed kids? We wrote this bill in 2020. Senator Chris Larson was our Senate lead. It's really simple. When we went through the COVID-19 pandemic, we did something nationally that we were told for years we couldn't do, which was shockingly just feed kids without the forms and all the hoops and everything. And again, shockingly, what we what the research told us would happen actually happened, which was kids needed to eat, academics improved, wellness improved, childhood obesity started to come down. I mean, it was just wild in terms of these improvements, and also we were able to eliminate school meal debt, school food service departments also saw an infusion of money, which allowed them to look at improvements in their infrastructure and food, and also, by the way, it saved working families money. See, I told you I could go on and on and on to tell you this, right? We wrote this bill, but the coolest thing about it is we started the Healthy School Meals for All Coalition, because we know that we're in the Capitol, a bill is a bill is a bill, but unless we get out in community and really talk to people about this, it's gonna die, right? Especially looking at the political reality of where the Republicans are and their inability to really dream or even think logically. So right now we had reintroduced it last year. There's now a coalition that's being run by 3 organizations. We have over 300 statewide stakeholders, everyone from local farmers to social workers to teachers to PTAs. WePen has been incredibly supportive. So I want to get this done. I want to give every kid in this state a free breakfast and a free lunch every single day at no cost. I also want to see special education go up. It should go to 90%. That's what voucher schools get. Right now we're at, 33%? Districts are moving millions of dollars from their general fund to cover ballooning costs of special education. We have a constitutional obligation in this state to fund our public schools, but also to make sure every single student has the resources that they need. If we are not doing that, we're failing to live up to our obligation. But certainly other services like mental health and recess, right? And physical education, I mean, our students deserve the best. They can have the best, and the comments, I think you said it earlier, on scarcity mode. I refuse to live in that mode anymore. When I talk to teachers and they're like, I just have to pay for my own classroom resources, there's just not enough money. I'm like, there is money. There's a massive surplus of funds sitting in the Capitol right now that some people are refusing to spend and infuse into public education. It's not that there isn't money, it's a political decision by the few. And I think when we talk about it that way, we can get more people to understand why the system has been rigged against us, and we can move them with us to join us in these policy issues, because all of these things are connected.
Please do.
Oh, I appreciate you saying all that. And you know, one of the things when I have that conversation about there is money, is I look at people and I say, it's your money. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you paid those tax dollars. You have every right to demand what you want to demand and expect that legislators are actually listening to you. And that really starts making people start thinking like, oh, that is my money. It is your money. Also just thinking about kind of adding on to that privatization thought, and you were talking about the healthy meals. Let's go with a decade or so ago. There was a study, an audit done with Milwaukee Public Schools, and one of the audit recommendations was you could save money by privatizing the meal program. And what that did was, it took away jobs from families in Milwaukee because they fired all the lunch ladies. And instead of having meals that kids actually enjoyed, and I'm going to be honest, I enjoyed. I would go in for breakfast just with the kids because it was good. And the lunches were great. You walk into a school in MPS and you could smell freshly baked bread. You could smell, well, I know they don't do it now because they don't, peanut butter bars. That was very popular. So that being said, they privatized it. And the kids right now, Youth Empowered in the Struggle and other children, they're fighting to get real kitchens back in their schools so that they can actually have meals that sustain them, because what they're serving, I am in complete agreement and I'm fighting for them. It is unacceptable. So, I appreciate the spotlight on that, but also understanding how that connection of privatization of public good, it harms our communities.
I want you to talk a little more about that, because you started off by talking about how Milwaukee had really been a canary in the coal mine, and how Annette Polly-Williams, who was really the leading charge behind the initial voucher program, would end up turning against it and saying, this was never what we had in mind. As one state after another now enacts sweeping school voucher programs, I hear a lot of people talking about Milwaukee, but they don't necessarily, they don't know the things that you know. So we need your your help telling the story of what's happened in Milwaukee with respect to vouchers?
So I believe about 60% of students in Milwaukee attend Milwaukee Public Schools. When we say school choice, oh, there is plenty of choice. But to be honest, a lot of the choice comes down to if you can afford it, because that voucher is not going to cover some fancy private school on campus. A lot of times what has happened is you have schools that open in old Pizza Hut buildings, and that is what is supposed to be the education for children. And schools that may be considered a little more desirable in the land of vouchers, or I call them private charters, they have the opportunity, they actually have choice. They don't have to accept every child, and in fact, they don't. I think a lot of us in this room know the term Third Friday, which is how the state funds education in the state of Wisconsin. They count the students on that day, and they disperse dollars to the school district. That being said, our teachers in Milwaukee have lovingly coined the term Fourth Monday, because once they receive those dollars, they send the children that, you know what, I think your kid has too many needs, we can't meet them, but there's some public schools down the road that can meet them. So those students return, and the dollars aren't there, but the resources, be it special education, be it English language learners, or just, attempting to keep a smaller class size, the public school district is going to accept those children because that's what we're supposed to do. But we cannot continue down this path where we are funding multiple school districts. And once again, like when I talk to a lot of families, I just use the example of, if you have a paycheck and that paycheck goes to supporting your family, can you imagine if you say, now I want you to take that paycheck and support 2 other families? Because that's what we're asking the pot of money to do when we say it's okay to siphon public dollars to private institutions.
You did such a nice job of explaining why some of your legislators have been resistant to the kind of public push for things like school funding. And we heard there was a woman who spoke during the earlier session who lives in rural southwestern Wisconsin, who said, why isn't this at the top of every legislator's agenda? So I want you to think about that from the sunniest possible perspective. What do you think has changed that is now basically forcing legislators to acknowledge, you know what, folks, we may actually have an issue here?
I think we've taken it for granted. I often compare it to the fight for abortion rights. I'm going to take it there. For years, we were told not to talk about abortion rights in healthcare, right? It's too divisive. It's uncomfortable. How do we do it? We're going to, people don't want to talk about it. Don't talk about it. It's fine. We have it. Like, our rights are there. And what we saw was that being stripped away, right? It was stripped away, and then it was taken away, and now we don't know what the future of that's going to look like. And what did we do when all that hit the fan? We organized. We got our act together. We figured out how to talk about it. We realized that actually the majority of people believe that people should have a choice of bodily autonomy and to be able to make their own healthcare decisions. And now that's one of the top issues. If I don't want public education to get to the place where healthcare had to get, for us to realize how important it is, for us to then start to fight for it in the way that we've done for healthcare rights. And I'm afraid that if we don't pull it together, we're going to get there. Public education truly is one of the last remaining cornerstones of public good in our country and our state. When you think about union rights and other institutions that we had that really brought people together for a shared future, public education is one of those last ones. And we know that this fight is not going to go away from the privatization side. We know that the majority of people send their kids to public schools, and we know the majority of people want strong public schools. So I think in terms of being a candidate, being a legislator, I think we've tried to do as good of a job as we can to educate our fellow colleagues who have done an incredible job understanding very complicated issues like school finance, right, and working with partners like Lee Penn and teachers unions to get better at messaging it, to talk about it. The privatization movement is really good at messaging this, right? I mean, who is against choice, right? Well, which is hilarious if they are against it with healthcare, right? So which is hilarious. But I mean, if you're like, well, it's parent choice, right? Well, it's hard to message that. But what I tell people all the time, this isn't parental choice. This is schools choosing their students. It's actually schools getting to choose and actively discriminate who they want to educate. Public schools can't do that, right? They're constitutionally protected. We have to accept every kid. But a voucher school that receives public money can actively discriminate against kids who are too expensive because of an IEP, or because they find out that a student is gay, right? Or they just don't like you. After they accept you, which they legally have to do, they have to take your application, and they can't discriminate you through the application process, but once you're accepted, they can remove you for pretty much any reason. And so we have to talk about those real stories and the harms, and also, and I'm just going to say this too, recognize that some of many of the folks who have experienced real harms in public education, right? I mean, there's historical harms there that we have to reckon with. But we need those folks to come with us to really reimagine what public schools are going to be looking forward, not allowing them to be taken over by people who are using them for a movement that's only going to further harm communities.
Yes. Ingrid, we have been talking a lot about Republicans because that's who has been in charge of your state for quite some time. But the calls to do things like break up the Milwaukee Public Schools or dramatically increase the number of charter schools, and even some of the pro-voucher advocacy isn't just limited to Republicans. I want you to talk a little bit about how you think we might respond to Democrats who have embraced some of this same messaging.
I don't think I found the magic keywords to make that happen, but you are actually absolutely correct. And I say this to my members, and I will say that my members are very politically astute, in that public education doesn't necessarily have any permanent friends in the Democrat or Republican House, and we have to push on all of them to do the right thing. And it is so frustrating because I have representatives who work in the Capitol and they know what is happening around privatization and school choice, and they stick with that, but no, it's the parents' choice. And I'm like, we can say that, but we're still not funding public ed, guys. We're still not making sure that children in public schools are taken care of. And somehow in the last couple of sessions, as stated, reimbursement funds are actually going up for private, unaccountable schools. And there's a lot of legislators who seem to be okay with public schools languishing. So I continue to look for look for legislators who are strong with public ed, and they exist. I'm seeing some in the room right now. And just pushing, and I'm going to be honest, sometimes calling out those who say that they're friends with public ed, but their voting record doesn't show that.
I want to thank you for that, Ingrid, because I know from partners I've heard it's very difficult, especially over the past year, some of the votes and the political decisions that have been made in Madison. I know you've taken some difficult stances to hold people accountable. And I think that's one thing I did say, and I wanted to thank you for that. That accountability piece is absolutely critical, and holding the line and being really clear that we don't negotiate on our public schools and on our public educators or our public school kids. Thank you.
And that is why people are probably really mad at NTEI.
So we started off this conversation looking at both the sort of hopeful, the breaks in the clouds in Wisconsin, things like fairer maps, and the real sense of possibility that lies ahead with the next election cycle. But also, signs of concern, as we heard, from Ingrid, the voucher cap is about to be lifted. There are plenty of people in the state who thought of this as a Milwaukee problem or a Racine problem, and they are about to learn the hard way that that is not actually the case. And so I want to leave plenty of time for questions, and I want to just wrap up by having each of you identify something you feel really hopeful about, and then maybe something that you're feeling a little less encouraged by. And why don't we start with the bleaker part so that we can end on a sunny note?
Okay, so it's like a peak and pit sort of thing. Okay, my pit. The challenge that I see for us, and Heather actually said this on Have You Heard? I listened to it on the way down yesterday, the one that you had with her and Jack and Derek. She said this, that the frustrations that parents and people feel, they're scared, it's their children, right? It's the most important thing that you do as a parent is, one of those, where do you go to school? And so we have to find a way to channel those feelings and those frustrations that people and parents have and help them join, I don't want to say us because that feels like a side, but come together to really problem solve instead of pitting each other against one another. I'm thinking like Moms for Liberty and these different groups that are sort of radicalizing school boards and going after book bans and whatnot. I really believe that a lot of those folks, even though I disagree with their tactics, I understand their frustration and their fears, because that was actually one of the reasons that I got involved in the Green Bay School Board, and not a book ban, but it was I was mad about something. The Green Bay School District was going to hire a private company to turn around the middle school for like $300 million. And I was like, absolutely not, that's gonna happen, right? And I was mad. And then I learned more about it, and I got more involved. And I think we can take that hit and really talk to people and really engage with them. I think it could be a peak maybe. Yeah, I'll turn a pit to a peak. And I'll say I'll end on a really positive. Honestly, I love this summit. I love coming together with all of y'all and seeing some of my closest friends and meeting other people and seeing the great organizing that WePen is doing, but just the way that we're all working together. And I know if we continue to engage with one another and build these relationships, we're going to do some incredible things.
Ingrid, I'm going to ask you a slightly different version of the same question. As someone who's deeply involved in the Milwaukee Public Schools, you have been dealing with one challenge after another. It never stops. So what I want to know is, do you feel like during that work, especially more recently, have you found new allies that you might not have had before?
I still want to answer the pit part. Well, I would say I view it as a pit that I strongly believe, and keep hearing rumors is coming, is that there will be another takeover attempt for Milwaukee Public Schools. And for me, it's about helping people understand that Milwaukee has every right to enjoy the same liberties that any other school district or city across the state of Wisconsin has. So you don't hear, even though other school districts face some of the same issues financially or however, you don't hear talk of takeover. It happens for Milwaukee, which, if we're going to be honest, largest community of Black and brown people in the state of Wisconsin, and somehow always get treated differently. So I think for me, like an upcoming, I would call it challenge, is making sure that people understand the dynamics of what is really happening, what is being asked for, and why we're okay to let something happen to one group of people that we would not accept for ourselves. And my peak, it has been the fact that we did have people in our community come around and organize around a referendum, because no matter what, people understood that students deserve opportunities. And one of the biggest things that really got to people was the fact that a lot of the money was designated to go to art and music. Something so basic that we know students need, and sometimes it's the thing that makes students actually come to school. They may not be interested in anything else, but they want the fine arts. And we should be able to provide that. And so like as my peak is knowing that because people in Milwaukee came together and they made the decision, they voted to support students, we were able to go from about 19% of the student population to, I want to say, over 80% experiencing instruction by an art teacher. By a music teacher. We were able to add about 34 art teachers in the district. So when I talk about my peak, it's that organizing, that helping people understand what is happening and that we don't have to sit powerless and we can come together and make great things happen.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you. And I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to be in the company of two such brilliant and forceful advocates for public education. I learned so much sitting in between the two of you. And we have time for questions if anyone has one. And then there's also time for a break before the mandatory closing session. So does anyone have a question?
You mentioned ALEC. Is there on the horizon a progressive counterpart to that?
There are some national.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot my microphone. I'm a former FIED teacher, so my voice carries. Yes, there are some organizations and groups that nationally that we work with and our caucuses have been working with. But I would say probably nothing as prominent and as well known as, and probably as well funded as ALEC. But I do believe that we're getting there. And one of the biggest issues that we need to fight against too is the policy network that ALEC runs, which is they basically draft policies with donors and large think tanks, and then they shop those around. So a lot of the policies that we've seen are simply just templates that we've seen in Arizona to Florida to other conservative states.
Anybody else have a question?
So a question on this layout is Act 10, is there something working its way through the Supreme Court to potentially reverse Act 10? Or am I thinking that?
I'm going to say ask the law forward person.
There's a Supreme Court, there's a court, the court case is probably making its way to the state Supreme Court.
Like nothing is changing right now.
This question is mostly for Ingrid, like how did you get parents involved in this advocacy work and what kind of role did they play?
So I'm going to use the referendum as the most recent. We have members, of course, in every single building. And our members know who the active parents are. And our members, they would make sure that the PTO, et cetera, hey, do you need information about what is happening for the referendum? You know what, you can contact MTEA. They can help you get the information you need. So ensuring that those different parent groups started holding sessions around the city. And the topic of the day, once again, was the referendum. Here's what we know. Here are the facts. Here is, what it does for your taxes. Here is what it's going to do for the school system. And also continuing to make the parents aware of this is why. It's because Wisconsin is not funding our schools. So one of the things is just knowing that our members are out there and they have a wide network. On top of that, from the office, and by the way, MPS, we serve over 130 schools as the union. So I know, we don't have 130 staff people, right? But everyone is all hands on deck effort. So not only are our members kind of pointing PTOs where they need to go, but we have our members who are meeting parents before and after school, or our staff people, and that includes release members as well as representational staff. And we're just talking to the parents really quick. Hey, are you aware of this? Do you know what's going on? Are you interested in learning more? How can we come together and let's have your information so that we can make sure to stay in touch? So it takes a lot of work. It takes you being there, and it takes you talking about an issue, and sometimes even being frustrated because, yeah, sometimes their message is louder, but the payoff is just huge because then you have people who are, in our case now, coming to the union to knock doors on Saturday with the educators. You have people who are doing fundraisers for the referendum campaign, so.
Anybody else have a question?
So, I live in a district that, I live in a very, very rural school district. There is, I'm trying to be nonpartisan here, but like the elections, there's typically only candidates from one party and they all run unopposed. Like I have not seen community evidence of anyone even caring about this kind of problem. Like most of the people are, Moms for Liberty members. So like, if you don't have like a history of organization, you don't have any history of like progressive, in living memory anyway, progressive ideas, like what would be like your step one, your ground zero, like to get, not necessarily solve it, but just to get something started?
I love this question. I'm going to put my executive director for Wisconsin Progress hat on right now. You can let me know and we will come help you, because that's what we do. We'll help you organize. That is a real thing, right? Especially too, because in some of these very deeply red communities, even if you are or identify as not deeply red, people are concerned about getting involved. And we know that we need a representative democracy, even on school boards, especially on school boards and on local governments. So I think it's about, as Ingrid said, it's about relationship building, it's about getting out and talking to people, it's about talking about values. And I also think you can run people for these positions and really focus on the direct needs of teachers and students without it being red or blue, but just the critical needs and connecting it to local issues. I think that sort of helps to strip away the hyper-partisan, inflammatory language that people will see, but it's certainly a barrier that people are facing, especially because the threats of political violence are real, even for school boards, right? Even for these local, nondescript positions, people are afraid to say anything for their own safety.
Last question?
I have Republicans in my area who are propagating the myth that schools have lots of money, they just don't know how to manage it. And I talk to voters who have absorbed this message. What is your answer to that, to the people who think that, well, there's lots of money and you just run it like a business? I hear this all the time, and it's interested in your
That's a good one. I don't know if I could answer that. Sure. What I can say is, and it's not a fun answer, right? But when we talk about things that students need, like lower class size, well, you need adults to do that. And I think it's not even a thing, I know as a society, we need to and we should value workers. And in order to have those adults, to make the lower class sizes, we do have to compensate them. So yeah, it looks crazy, but yes, a district's biggest expense is gonna be the educators, but we need those educators. We need the people who are going to work with our children, who are going to, do FIED, who are going to take them on field trips, etc. So it's not a fun answer, and it's a conversation that to be had. I'm not the messaging guru, obviously, on that one, but it's something when I think about it, I talk about this is how a school actually works, and this is how it functions. And, this is why we have to ask parents to bring in 4 boxes of Kleenex. It's not that anybody is hiding anything, it's that it doesn't exist. We don't have it, and we want to make sure that your child has the best experience.
I think this would be great for BPEN to do some message testing on this. I would also say too, my dear friend, Representative Andraka, that I would remind them that public schools are the most transparent of all of the schools around the state because they belong to us. And that their records, including their budgets and a lot of their finances, are public record and you can access by doing a public record request. And remind them that the schools that are not required to disclose their financial statements include voucher and private religious schools funded with public money. So I would ask them where they're getting their information from and remind them that if they want it, public schools can give it to them and that will help them understand their concerns. But it doesn't mean that messaging works. I think we should see if we can do some messaging on that though. Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead. You just always make things come up. But it's interesting because as we can tell by the media, has really been going after MPS on a lot of different issues lately. And someone stood up in one of the audiences and said, why aren't you asking this of any private voucher charter? And the reporter looks and says, because we can't get their records.
Did either of you have anything, last thing you want to say before we send everyone away? And don't forget to inspire us.
No, it's gonna be really easy. Go fight win.
School meals. Talk to every single person, you know, we can do this next year, we can get this done, and it's gonna make a huge difference. So if there's one thing I'm asking you to do, school meals, school meals, school meals. Thank you.
Can we have a round of applause for our excellent